Hey, this is Mike from the Run Testers, and this is our first run review of the Hoka Stinson 7. Okay, so here's what you need to know about the Hoka Stinson 7. So this is definitely a shoe that you would class as a road to trail shoe. Now it's priced at £160 in the UK, $170 in the US. So that's kind of putting it up against road to trail shoes like the Innovate Parkour G280, which we're big fans of on the channel. It's more expensive than the Nike Pegasus Trail 4, and it is also more expensive than the Hoka Challenger 7, which we all really liked on the channel as well too. So in terms of those key features, you have got a engineered jacquard mesh upper. You've got a toe cap up front here to offer some extra protection. You're getting a similar style midsole foam that we had on the previous Hoka Stinson, but the stack height has slightly changed and it's got a little bit bigger on the Stinson 7 compared to the previous Stinson. Now Hoka also has this kind of H frame that it talks about here, which just sits above the midsole, and that is designed to offer a more stable feel when you are running in this shoe. You've got multi-directional lugs on the bottom of the shoe as well to give you that kind of grip on varied terrain, and weight-wise it is lighter than the previous Stinson, but it is still quite a heavy shoe, and if you compare it to something like the Hoka Challenger 7, it's definitely a notably heavier road to trail shoe in comparison. So yeah, those are the key things you need to know about the Stinson 7. Myself and Tom will get into our initial running thoughts on the Stinson 7 and whether it has made a good or bad impression.
So I haven't got the Stinson 7 here because I was using Mike's to test out the shoe on my first run and he's taken it back now. I'm also wearing a vest because it's really hot at the moment in my flat, so deal with it. Right, so the fit of the Stinson 7 for me, I would say it's a little bit wider, a little bit roomier than what you probably expect from a lot of Hoka shoes. It's not massively wide, it's just a bit wider than I would have expected. So it's quite a comfortable shoe, it's a bit roomier than I would expect. Still didn't have a problem getting a nice lockdown fit in it, even though there's a little bit more space in it. And the upper is very comfortable. I found I could get a nice locked in fit, the heel was in very nicely. And all in all, I would say that I would stick to my size, which is UK size 8 in the Stinson 7.
So fit for me, I would say has been typically Hoka in terms of my experience. Now I pretty much go with the UK size 8 in most of the Hoka running shoes that I've tested, which has generally been fine for me. It is a little on the narrow side. I definitely felt like it sat pretty snug up front here in the toes, but it does open up in places. I think that's down to creating that kind of wider, more stable kind of feel in this shoe. But generally hasn't been any issues. It hasn't felt uncomfortable. I just have noticed, like a lot of Hoka shoes, it does fit a little bit narrow, and unlike something like the Challenger 7, you don't have a wide option here to go for as well. Elsewhere, I mean, lockdown has been absolutely fine. You're getting a good level of padding here on the tongue. It's not overly padded, I would say. Kind of pretty generous kind of padding in the heel collar as well. No slippage for me either. So yeah, I mean, a UK size 8 for me, which is what I usually go in Hoka running shoes, has been fine, but I would say that does fit a little bit snug up front of the toes, or did for me anyway. So there might be an argument to play around the sizes, maybe go half a size up, but I think for me it's been fine in my UK size 8 based on my initial run.
Okay, so my first run in the Stinson 7 was out in Chamonix. I did a 10-mile trail run, which was slightly across some road, but mainly across trail paths, gravelly paths, and I went a bit into the forest, which was more like hard, compact mud, and there were a few inclines and declines, which tended to be a bit gravelly on that run as well. The 10-mile run I did was part of a 20-mile run, so I was testing another shoe at the start of that, and it was a pretty easy run. So I was running at 5:20 pace, which for me is my sort of easy pace. Wasn't picking it up at all. I did try a couple of faster reps in it. I headed down into the middle of Chamonix and went on the track actually and did a few laps of the track and tried to pick up the pace a bit. What I found about the shoe is that it reminds me of the Bondi 8, which in road sense I don't like. I'm not a big fan of the Bondi. I find it to be a very bulky shoe. The midsole is a bit too firm for me. It's meant to be a really max cushion shoe, but because the midsole is quite firm, it doesn't really deliver like a max cushion shoe for me. And the Stinson 7 feels like that shoe. But for the Stinson 7, it's not really a bad thing because that bit slightly firmer midsole actually works very well on the trails when you're running across slightly softer ground. And the terrain that I was running across, it felt very comfortable. It's by no means a fast shoe. It's definitely a shoe designed for workhorse miles on the trails. It's very stable. It really protects the feet with the midsole, and it just does a solid job if you're just clocking up the miles at a nice, comfortable pace. What I would say is that you can't really pick up the pace in it, so it's not a very versatile shoe. If you wanted to do faster reps and things like that on the trails, you probably need another shoe as well. But it's a great workhorse and it feels very sturdy. The outsole's very good. I didn't run on any wet ground, but I was doing a couple of inclines and declines on gravel paths, and it felt completely fine. The outsole rubber, the lugs aren't massive, but it did feel nice and tacky, and you could get a good grip on the gravel. I didn't feel at any point that I was at risk of slipping or anything like that, and the stability of the midsole really helps with that as well. Other thing I'd say about it is that there is a bit of a rocker in the forefoot, not massive. I did feel like it had a nice turnover on the trails. It's not a fast shoe, as I say, but it does feel like you can get a nice consistent pace, and it's not slow and sluggish like I feel that the Bondi 8 is, even though it's quite a similar shoe on the road. But I'd also say that on the road, it does deliver pretty similar to what you'd expect from like the Bondi 8. It's not the fastest shoe in the world. It does feel quite clunky, and I probably wouldn't do a lot of road miles on it. But as soon as you get onto slightly softer ground, it does pretty good, and I prefer it to the Bondi 8.
So my first run in the Stinson 7 was a pretty easygoing 10k run while I was out in Chamonix last week. I did a little bit of elevation, not as much as those men and women were doing across that week, but I got a little bit of a taste of it, and also a little bit of the technical terrain you do find in that area as well. And then the second half of the run, I tried to do a mixture of the kind of road and kind of lighter trails on kind of more flatter, kind of less elevated terrain, see how it handled, or I could pick up the pace a little bit in places, see whether this was capable of, you know, handling a little bit of that kind of quicker kind of running time as well. Now, I haven't run in a Stinson before. I have run in the Challenger 7, which is the other kind of road to trail shoe in Hoka's range, which, you know, and that's a shoe I've really liked spending time in now. Hoka kind of, I would say, classifies this as a kind of plush road to trail shoe, one that gives you a good level of comfort, something that you can probably run a lot in for long periods, and it's going to give you that kind of, as I said, protection, comfort, and enough to get you kind of churning out a lot of running time in this shoe. Now, what I would say is kind of the first part of that run, I wouldn't say that it massively handled that kind of technical terrain very well. It's quite a heavy shoe. You know, you compare it to something like the Challenger 7, as I said, it's not as light as that shoe, doesn't feel as agile as a nimble. I think the outsole was fine in terms of that surface. You've got these kind of 4mm lugs, and it was absolutely fine. I just didn't feel like I could really navigate in the way around those kind of more, you know, challenging kind of surfaces in this shoe. I think down to the kind of mainly the weight that you're getting here, and it's a big shoe. It's a big shoe to kind of want to try and run quickly around, you know, when you're kind of big rocks, a lot of kind of branches and stuff where it's gonna be tricky to kind of do ultimately. Now, when I was back on kind of flatter terrain, it was absolutely fine. The outsole felt good on the kind of pavements. It, you know, I didn't feel those lugs. It didn't kind of press in to the kind of base of my foot. So from that point of view, I think it can, you know, transition between the two surfaces pretty well. In terms of that feeling, in terms of that ride, it's plush. You know, it's not super plush like some of the road shoes now offer in terms of midsoles, an EVA based midsole like the Stinson before. It's not the kind of PIBA based midsoles that we're seeing from Hoka, and it's kind of, you know, Rocket X2 and some of those kind of top tier road shoes. In terms of what you're getting here on this shoe, it seems fine, I would say. I would say the overriding feeling for me is that it feels very smooth, very stable. There is this kind of early stage meta rocker that Hoka uses. I would say, you know, it's not massively prominent. There's enough to make it feel like you're kind of rolling through relatively nicely, but it's not massively aggressive and not massively noticeable, I would say, overall. But I think the most redeeming quality, I would say, in my runs is that it's just felt very controlled in terms of that running time. It just feels too heavy to run quicker in it, but I don't think it's really designed for that type of running. But I feel if you were looking for a shoe to run and log a lot of mileage, then it will probably work from that point of view. It's not going to be the most exciting ride. Yes, it's heavy, but it doesn't feel clumpy in terms of that heaviness, but you will notice it, particularly if you use something like the Challenger 7 or things like the Pegasus Trail 4. It reminds me a little bit, I would say, probably more of the Innovate Parkgold G28 in terms of that size, but I think that holds its kind of size a little bit better, and I would say the ride feels a lot more excitable. I think that the midsole on the Innovate shoe, road to trail shoe, feels a little bit more bouncy, a little bit more fun, energetic. I think on the Stinson 7, I think the ride and the midsole that you're getting and the feel of it is fine. It's, as I said, smooth, stable, controlled, and if that's the kind of things that you look for in a kind of road to trail shoe where you just want to eat up a lot of running time, then I think it's well suited to that. In terms of being a exciting shoe to run in, and I say in that first run, it didn't feel like that, but it felt comfortable enough, felt protected enough in terms of the trails and the kind of road time that I put in with it. So from that point of view, and then also the grip and the outsole feels solid, and also, you know, didn't feel like, you know, it was an issue in terms of the road time as well. So yeah, in terms of my first run with the Stinson 7, it was absolutely fine. As I said, I don't think it can handle that technical terrain, though I don't think that's where Hoka pitches it. I don't think it's a shoe you're going to want to run quickly in. There are better trail shoes in Hoka's collection to do that, and I think there's better road to trail shoes that can offer that as well. But yeah, I think if you're looking for a comfortable, stable, kind of accommodating shoe, I think in general that's going to give you enough of a kind of rocker feeling to kind of get you through those kind of longer miles with a mixture of terrain, then I think it can kind of do a very good job. But I do ultimately think that the Challenger 7, I feel, you know, maybe it's not the same level of kind of midsole feel and that kind of ride, but I do think that's a really good shoe, and it costs less, but I'll get into more of that in my initial verdict.
So my verdict on the Stinson 7 is that it is a solid workhorse trail shoe that is very stable, very comfortable, and has a nice little bit of space in the upper, which you don't get a lot in Hoka shoes. I would say that it's not a particularly versatile shoe. If you're looking for a trail shoe to do all of your runs in and you want to maybe do some faster stuff, it's not that sort of shoe. It's really designed to just be very protective, very secure, and just keep you going across those miles in comfort and protecting your feet, basically. So I did enjoy that first run in it, and if I get them off mic again, I think I would quite like to do some more miles in it.
Okay, so some initial thoughts on the Hoka Stinson 7. I would think as a road to trail shoe, and based on the stuff that I've kind of tested around this kind of category, I would say the Stinson 7 is a road to trail shoe that can handle those mixture of terrain. I would say in terms of trails, I definitely would say less technical trails based on kind of my experience so far. I think in terms of the feeling of running in a shoe, the main things for me is that it feels pretty controlled, it feels very stable, the ride feels pretty smooth, and I think generally it feels well protected as well, and a shoe that will be able to handle a lot of running time, and that's obviously going to do a little bit more running in a shoe to kind of see how it handles those longer distances. But in terms of, is this the best road to trail shoe that I've used? Maybe not. Maybe it's just not the one for me. I think Hoka has a better road to trail shoe in its collection already in terms of the Challenger 7. That is lighter. I think the ride is pretty enjoyable on that shoe as it is already. I think I look at other road to trail shoes, similar in terms of the price. Innovate Parklaw G280, I think the ride feels a lot nicer. This shoe probably looks nicer than Innovate Parklaw G280, I would definitely say that. But in terms of the feeling of running in that shoe and how it transitions between road to trail, I just feel that feels a little bit nicer. Then you've got things like the Nike Pegasus Trail 4. Again, it is much cheaper than this shoe. Again, you know, it might not feel as accommodating or as, I don't know, you know, as stable maybe as this shoe, but in terms of what you're getting in terms of a full package, I think it offers a lot. I think you're probably getting a better outsole here on the Stinson 7 compared to the Pegasus Trail 4. So I think for me, this is an interesting one because I think Hoka already has a very good road to trail shoe here. Now, obviously, this is probably set as kind of being a different shoe, but I think ultimately the types of runs that this shoe works for, I think the Hoka Challenger 7 can handle as well, and maybe give you scope to kind of slightly pick the pace up in places as well. And it's lighter and it's cheaper overall. So yeah, you know, I've not had a bad experience with the Hoka Stinson 7. I just think in terms of my experience of road to trail shoes, and also in terms of what Hoka already has in its collection, I feel that maybe the Challenger 7 is going to be a shoe that works, you know, enough for most people, and it's cheaper, and you get it in either, you know, a wide fit option as well too, where you don't on the Stinson 7. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts on the Stinson 7. Pretty solid overall, but I do think there's probably better road to trail shoes out there, more exciting road to trail shoes, and also I think there's better ones in Hoka's collection already too. Okay, so there you have it, some initial thoughts on the Hoka Stinson 7. Obviously plenty more running to do in the shoe, definitely going to be in less mountainous terrain, we can say for sure. There'll be other untesters who'll be joining us in on that full multi-tester review as well too. Now, if you've got any questions about the shoe in the meantime, or other shoes that you want to see compared to, we'll definitely take a look a bit closer at how it compares to the Challenger 7. Then let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out our latest videos, and yeah, See you in the next Run Testers video.